This is the Maxiao Leadership Podcast.
You cannot manage a sales team like anybody else in the organization. You can't. There are nuances and things that are placed on salespeople that no other team in the organization has placed on them. I wanted to start a business that only involved what I really love doing, which obviously based on what I've shared so far is around the leadership development, and not only working with myself, but working with others and passing along the knowledge and the skills and the tools that are going to be needed for others to get at. And I recognized again early, the more I can develop people around me, the more my career is going to develop. If I want to look at my sales team and understand why they're not being effective, why they're not selling more, what's the one thing that unsuccessful sales teams all have in common?
Welcome to the Maxiao Leadership Podcast. My guest today is an inspiring leader who is not your average leadership development expert. As a co-founder of Result-Driven Leadership and former CarMax Executive, Vaughn Sigmon knows what it takes to be a high-impact leader and manager. Rather than offering theory, his coaching and training programs provide common sense advice and direction based on real-world experience. Vaughn's leadership methods are sure to impress. His mission is to improve the impact of executives and managers by enhancing their knowledge, skills, and abilities. His motto states it all: no matter what business you're in people's business. Without further ado, let's welcome Vaughn Sigmon. Good morning, Vaughn, and welcome to the program.
It is so good to be here. It's an honor. You've got such a fabulous reputation and background. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Vaughn. Usually I do some research about the guest and I'll go through the website and trying to find words for the intro. And when I got to yours, I was so impressed by the way it was written. I thought I'll just go with that. And so I'd like to start there about your motto. Why is that your motto? Why do you say, well, no matter what business you're in people's business?
Let me share a short story. That motto goes back. I actually borrowed it from a early in my career boss, Ted Boswell. And Ted drilled in me early. I was early 20s. I had no business in the position I was in. They were taking a huge chance with me, but they saw something in me and gave me the chance. And Ted was the person that drew out what I had in those early stages that ended up being the successful leader or executive I was later on. But Ted drilled into me, no matter what business we're in the people business. And as long as you get the people part right, almost everything else becomes far easier. And when you get yourself frustrated, things are falling behind, things aren't working the way they should be, don't worry about the number, worry about the people who are driving the number and look at their behaviors, because it's the behaviors that drive the number. It's the people that will make you successful. And I followed that motto for my 40+ year career. And it's pretty well.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. And, I'm a numbers person by training. I'm an accountant, CFO, and I also come to the same realization, which is why I'm doing this program, that it's all falls on the leader, and the leader's job is people. And thank you for sharing that. So would you mind telling a bit more about yourself and how you got to leadership and to what you're doing? What's your story?
There was something in me from a very early age. I'm talking about elementary school, where I wanted to have a position of authority. I wanted to lead people. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to somehow, even in second, third, fourth grade wanted to be the top class. Now, I wasn't very smart, still not very smart, but I knew I had a natural gift for people, and I think to some degree leadership. I started in for class office very early in my life, and so there's always been this fascination of leading people and being influential to others. And I got a kick out of that. That would fed my soul, maybe my ego too. But as I went through high school, later in life, I just, whatever was in me, a natural gift that I have a fascination for it, but I also studied it. And I read a lot of books. I mostly watched others that I looked up to. What are they doing? What do they do differently than the people who aren't very good at this? And I modeled my behaviors, approaches to leading people with having the proper model of people who successfully do it, the behaviors day in and day out. And from that, between the reading and education I got that way, modeling my behaviors after others, that fascination with leadership, not only of others, but of myself. I knew I had to work on myself, because I can't just say these things. I have to live these things. But my natural tendency is polar opposite of what I really need to be effective as a leader. And it's understanding those triggers that are going to go off your main course or the proper course. So it's a very complex. Anybody in leadership recognizes I'm not the only person that's ever pointed this out, certainly. But it's always been this passion and interest in people. And I committed myself to it. And I ended up with a very nice long-term career that I retired from almost 10 years ago. I started this business. And when I retired, I took about 90 days off. Not working was never going to be an option, really mentally, but just that's never any attraction. I wasn't very good at golf, and I don't have many friends. Not kidding, but it's I wanted to start a business that only involved what I really love doing, which obviously, based on what I've shared so far, is around the leadership development. And not only working with myself, but working with others and passing along the knowledge and the skills and the tools that are going to be needed for others to get at. And I recognized again early, the more I can develop people around me, the more my career is going to develop. That's probably the single biggest contribution that I could make to any of the organizations I work with, who are all scaling companies. I never went to work for any status quo companies. I worked for companies. They hired me because I had a reputation for helping companies scale. So I scaled people, and why don't I just turn that into a business and provide that skill, that knowledge, and certainly the tools. I've been a hoarder of knowledge and tools I've used through the years. Turn all that into courses, executive coach programs, teach other coaches how to use it, which I've done as well, and model that into a business that everybody that ever retires and starts a business never wants another boss. And I was one of those people. I wanted to be my own boss, and that's not all that's cracked up to be, believe me. But I wanted to be able to do exactly what I wanted to do every day. And that's what I've ended up with. I work with dozens and dozens of companies, at times hundreds of people, imparting the knowledge, skills, and tools they need to be more successful in their careers and their lives. And from that, companies get a very significant ROI, and it's a win-win for everybody involved. So I could never do what you do. That's way beyond my scope of talent and intelligence. And so there's a lot of folks out there that know they want to be better leaders or need to improve the leadership skills of the people who are supporting them in their organization. And I come parachuting in and guide them along.
No, that's really impressive. And now, before we will come back to your current practice, but you had, as you said, a quite successful and long career before that. And I think the last company was CarMax. Would you mind sharing about how you joined them and what has been your role with CarMax?
You know, the mention of the name CarMax always brings a smile to my face because one, I gained so much from working with them. And I had so much fun as part of that. CarMax is in the United States, the largest retailer of cars in the country by a mile. They outsell their closest competitor by 6 or 7x. CarMax was created by another company that has since gone out of business, Circuit City, but they saw a need in the consumer experience space back in the early 90s in the car business, where it had and still has to some degree, a horrible stigma around the customer experience of buying a car. And almost everybody that ever bought a car walks out of the dealership thinking, how did I just get screwed? How did I just get taken advantage of? And generally if they knew what they were looking for, find some way that they were taken advantage of. That's a horrible approach, but it's the way cars have been sold for 100 years. CarMax set upon a path of changing all that. And so they did a very deep study into consumers' minds. What do you not like about car business? What do you not like about the experience of purchasing an automobile, especially a used automobile, which has a whole nother set of stigmas attached to it? They got a lot of data back, and that data was customers hate the negotiation part of it, especially on a used car where it's not a commodity. They're all snowflakes. What is this car really worth? How to get rid of an old car and not be taken advantage of? How do I know that I'm getting the best interest rates and payment offers that I'm getting? If I don't like my purchase, can I bring it back? Being stuck with something you don't want naturally is not something consumers want. And the whole experience of most dealerships, at least here in the States, is you get passed along from department to department, person to person, they all have a different job, generally to get into your pocket more money out of you. CarMax recognized that, and when you buy a CarMax, you deal with one person, the sales consultant that greets you at the door. They take care of everything from beginning to end. So everything in the organization was designed to fit into that desire and need that customers had shared with us. So they've got a huge selection. They created the reconditioning process or the certification process that is widely used in the automotive industry on used cars, especially branded used cars, certified used cars. They created that to create the safety in the minds of folks who are buying a car from us. They created and it's still to this day is cutting edge technology that very few companies have been able to copy, is online credit approvals that get your number back within seconds from multiple sources. And the customer gets to see all those approvals on one screen and gets to choose the one that makes the most sense for them. So the sales consultant handles everything there. You get to build a relationship there. We also created the commission program that no matter what car this sales consultant sold, they get paid one flat fee. So it doesn't matter what car they sell. Their motivation is to find the car you want, the best fit for your need. It's very different from primarily the rest of the industry. So with all that, it began building. They recruited me away from a department store chain. That's another kind of unusual thing. CarMax does not hire people from the car industry. They hire people from big box retail to come in and work in the organization. When they hire people from that, they're very good at promoting from within. About 80% of their leadership more are people who are promoted from within. They wanted to make it a place to work for probably close to 30 years now. CarMax has been a Fortune 100 best places to work. So they have very low turnover because it is an exceptional employer. So all these things together, we had great people, had a great experience, we had great product, built it into the huge company that it is. And I was able to get in there when they had 12 or 14 stores. I should remember it was somewhere in that neighborhood. When I retired, they were approaching 300 stores. They were very regionalized when I first joined them in the Southeast. They're now nationwide. And still to this day are hugely successful. And my appreciation for that company is they allowed me to do what I'm really good at, a whole lot of constrictions. They had a very, very lean management structure. It's me, I had a boss and the CEO, and it was a very, not only a thin management line, but it was decentralized. They empowered me, which I was then able to empower the folks working for me to make their own decisions. Teach them and learn them how to make great decisions and allow them to do it. In fact, the CEO said to me early on, says, if you have to call me to help you make decisions, I've hired the wrong person. Just do what you know is right. That's what I hired you for. And that was a great way to operate. Not many companies can pull that off because of the bureaucracy that so often comes into organizations. So I learned a lot. I was able to teach and influence a lot of other people. I think before I retired, we had my group of stores out here on the West Coast of the country, 27 vice presidents into the organization. Some started as trainees, some started as salespeople, some started as assistant managers, but 27 vice presidents, by far the most in the organization at that time. I don't know what's changed in the 10 years since I retired, but we became a people factory. And so I too at CarMax was able to concentrate and spend my time. And it was also a major contribution to the success of the company. Thankfully, I had a great team that certainly helped me along with all this, but we were able to have a culture and an approach to business. It was all people generated, people first. And it worked out really well for them. We were the most profitable region in the company, not always the biggest volume, but always the most profitable, because we had a group of people that cared a lot. And I think some of that came from how I walked the talk around the people side of things. And it was a fascinating business. I still miss it today, but I was done having a boss. I was done with the corporate life. And and they had been very good to me, and decided to cash it in my own thing.
Oh, that's great. That's a very great. Congratulations. That's such a wonderful experience. Now, I think there's something about sales, even if it's selling of a car, which, as you said, has stigma to it, but there's something about sales that every leader should cultivate. And so what would you say are the attributes of sales that every leader should try to develop?
Well, it starts with the mindset, and I'm really glad you asked this question. It's critical. I learned this very quickly and adapted my to things. You cannot manage a sales team like anybody else in the organization. You can't. There are nuances and things that are placed on salespeople that no other team in the organization has placed on them. First of all, they are paid based on what they do or what they sell, so commission. They're the team in the organization, generally, I'd say 99% of the time, they're facing competitors, somebody else trying to do something better than they are to take their commission away from them. And so that's two of the big things. And then the third, which is one that really comes back to you can't manage salespeople like anybody else, is they face rejection. You know, even in the best of a sales team, 2 out of 10 transactions are going to be successful. Two out of 10. That's in a great organization. Most organizations are 1 out of 10. So they fail 90 to 80% of the time. And think about that and how it works on your psyche. And if you're not always think about that in leadership of salespeople, you're really missing a huge opportunity and throttling the ability of your sales team to thrive. You've got to recognize these elements, got to be able to do the opposite of what your nature or maybe even your training indicates that you need to do. When they blow a sale, that's air quotes, blow a sale, you need to go prop it up. They didn't mean to. Believe me, they wanted that sale more than you did. How they get paid. But if it didn't go well, the last thing they need is their boss coming down on them, what you should have done, what you could have done, what didn't you do, and doing this whole debrief and postmortem of all the things they did wrong. That boss to the opposite needs to come in, or that leader needs to come in and say, wow, you did everything you could do. What did you learn that you could maybe do better next time? But man, just keep up the good work. You put it all in there and give them that encouragement. And that gets them back the next day with a fresh set of motivations to do well the next time, rather than driving this wedge between leadership and the sales team. Because if Stephen Covey wrote about this in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is the concept of the emotional bank account. And it is never more prevalent than in a sales team. And if you don't keep that emotional bank account fully funded all day, every day, knowing that you're going to have to make some withdrawals. But if you're not constantly giving that emotional encouragement, making those deposits, making them feel, making their egotistical balloons at the proper PSI all day, every day, knowing that there's going to be something that's going to release it, whether rejection or the product's not going to show up on time, all these things that are going to screw up their paycheck. If you're not constantly thinking about that as my first foot forward is to be making sure I keep them encouraged and feeling good about themselves. And always remember, they don't work for the company. They work for you as the sales leader. Their performance is going to be based on you, not on the company. You determine their success, not the company. And it's how you treat them, how you lead them is going to determine how successful your team's going to be, thus your company's going to be. And many managers, I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble in a minute, but I say it every time somebody asks me this question. So nobody's hunted me down yet.
Good,
but
right.
Many managers in sales get placed into that role with zero training on how to do it. They take their very best salesperson or a very successful salesperson, place them into a management position. And I think in all good intentions, they think that because that person's a great salesperson, they'll be able to lead a great sales team, and nothing can be further from the truth. And in fact, very often, not 100%, but very often, the best salesperson is not the right choice to be a sales leader, because the skill sets of an effective sales leader is more of a coach versus a salesperson. They need to be able to coach and train and influence people in a positive way, which has some element of sales in it. But it is very often your top salespeople have a me first approach or ego about them. Their self-esteem needs to be driven by their success. And when others are creating failure to their success, they want to lash out and blame others. Not 100%, but it's very common. And so when I come in and work with companies on their sales teams, and I do that a lot, it's probably 75% of my business, is we make sure we have the right person leading the team, and it's the right disc profile. They need to have some dominance and influence on them, but they need to have a fair amount of S or stability in them too, because success in sales is a routine. It's a process. And the sales team needs to be able to follow that process, a successful process, every day the right way. And those high S's are also great at supporting others. It's not about them. They're much more of a team person and a me person. And when I retired, I had 107 sales managers on my team with 1,000+ salespeople. We studied the vital behaviors of all the most successful sales managers, and this is where I speak from authority. And it was a clear separation between disc profile, approaches, and mindsets of the most successful salespeople. And rarely were these very successful sales managers great salespeople. They were good. They weren't great. They weren't my best. Because we knew that those people were the great salespeople were not going to be very successful. It was proven time after time after time being very successful in sales leadership. So it's understanding it is not your most dominant person to be leading a sales team. It's not the person that's going to carry the big hammer around and keep everybody in check all the time and, blowing up the phones like Wolf of Wall Street all day, every day. That is not a successful sales team. You can make 1,000 calls a day. It's what takes place on those sales calls. But what's that conversation like? Are they following the right approach or the right process that's going to make them successful? Most organizations do not spend much time thinking about that. They focus only on the number. They don't think about the behaviors that drive that number. So from a sales perspective, understand you must lead them differently. There are factors that influence the success of a sales that no other team has. You have to keep their emotional bank account overfilled 7 days a week, 365. You've got to be very careful around how you're affecting, because 90% of the success is going to come from their attitude, between their ears. And putting the right person in a leadership role, the selection of that person is often messed up. Often a inactive decision that many companies make. And if you know how to do that right, which is what my business is in many cases, I help companies do this right, the rewards are tremendous.
Yes, because you have the right sales.
It's easier to lead a sales team this way than it is with the big hammer all the time. So that was a long answer to your question, but I want to get my opinion out there a little bit.
No, absolutely. It's so important. And you mentioned dealing with rejection, that salespeople do a lot. And I think other part of the organization also has to deal with rejection, whether internal, external. What's your recommendation? What's the secret for best dealing with rejection as a leader?
Well, it is learning from the rejection. It's not blaming the rejection. It's learning from the rejection and being there when they fall. If you're not a leader, an open door leader for salespeople, they're going to turn to the people next to them and express their frustration or their disappointment. That person's going to join them in their misery. And that's not the best scenario to get over it. They're going to get mired in their pity for themselves. If you're a great sales leader, you want them to be able to get off from email or the phone call where the rejection takes place and be the first person they want to go talk to is the sales manager and share their misery with them. Share the disappointment with them, so that it really armed, that sales manager can then take the proper approaches. Say, well, okay, God, I know that sucks for you. I'm sorry that happened. You worked so hard on it. Is there anything you would have done differently that you could learn from so you could avoid it in the future? Turn it into a little bit of an opportunity for them to learn from it, maybe change their course in the future, not get mad about it, not share in their disappointment, but be there as their coach to pat them on the, dust them off, pat them on the back and back into the game. And in some cases, I've seen sales leaders, a very effective sales leader, say, wow, that's huge. You're not going to be any good the rest of the day. take the day off, come back tomorrow with a fresh perspective. That's the sort of thing, the out-of-box sort of thinking that drives a successful salesperson after rejection. Because nobody's going to be harder on a good salesperson than that salesperson. They'll beat themselves up fine. They don't need any help from anybody else. So give them time to go self-remedy themselves through their decommissioning what happened, and then get them ready for the next day.
Excellent. No, that's great advice. Now, you went on to create and co-found result-driven leadership. Can you tell us a bit more about that venture? How did you get to start it, and why did you call it result-driven leadership?
So often leadership is created to improve one's skill sets of sort. Leadership coaching and training, leadership is all about getting results. And great leadership gets results, but very rarely do the results and the leadership get tied into the same sense with each other. So it was actually me and one of my partners that came up, more Danny than me, that came up with the name. But as soon as he said it, I was like, that's it. That is exactly, it says what we want to do is create leaders who get results. And it is great leadership that drives results. Great leaders care. They know they care. In order to get folks to care about their job and about the company, you've got to show care. Emotional bank account, you've got to be there for them. You hire the right people. That's where it all starts. And or fails is there's so many people choosing, interviewing, and making hiring decisions based on a very ineffective formula. They stress way too much on the experience part of it and not the human part of it. I encourage people to always look at the people part, discount the experience part. In fact, very often you're better off hiring somebody with no experience, depending on the position, because that experience rarely transfers to your company. And it will often give you a misguided opinion of what success is going to be. You'll often be disappointed because this person doesn't come in and set the on fire because of all this great experience. Hire the right person and you'll have a lot more success. But it's if I can hire, onboard, lead, communicate, support people in the way that humans respond the best to, I'm going to get results. And everything that is in our courses and in our coaching approaches is all real world. It's what I don't have any trainers working on my team. They're all former executives. They've all been on the lines. They've all built successful teams. They've all utilized the same methods that we share with others. They're proven methods with decades of proof and success built behind them. When you have that kind of synergy and experience working with a company, that company's bound to benefit from that. The results of bringing results from leadership in is always a positive for them.
Right. So how would you summarize the framework that you take customers to? I understand very well that you start with the people, but how do you get to a stage, or how do you improve your leadership through results? Is there a framework that you teach your clients?
Yeah, we start out with two kickoff moments. One, we do a DISC profile. I think that is one of the most important tools any company can utilize in managing, leading, and selecting people to be on their team. We start with a DISC, help them understand their profile. More importantly, when I can, and it's generally almost always, we can encourage that company to do an entire team's worth of DISC profiles. When I understand the behavior patterns of others and can then adapt my approach to satisfy the needs of others' communication preferences, I'm way better off. When I can eliminate the emotional dysfunction that takes place because somebody else doesn't behave or think the way I do. DISC uncovers that and unmasks that frustration because they're different. They're not going to think like you. So it's opening those doors to people. We start with the people side of things, is understanding not only yourself as a human, but others around you. The next step is we utilize 10 key leadership approaches that are the same 10 for any successful leader. We go through, have a discussion as part of the onboarding, and then we have the client rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5. We want to be able to leverage their strengths, and we want to be able to minimize their weaknesses. And if we identify where they're maybe coming up a little short in some of the things that they would rate themselves lowest on, we can start providing them with a tool to build on that. If we understand what their strengths are, we can help coach them to be able to expand their impact based on that strength. And so that starts the onboarding. And then we have to keep it in the real world, but we also like to have a strategy. So we work on 90-day sprints with everybody. And what do you want to get accomplished in your leadership toolbox, your skill set over the next 90 days? And where are you going to have opportunities to apply that? It's one to have a discussion and learn something. It's only as good as what you retain. And the only way you're going to retain it very well is go apply it. So we try to keep things current so that they can take what they want to improve on or expand on and apply it right away. So we keep it in today's world. We don't talk in theories ever. It's what's really happening in their lives. And we're always on call for any situation that comes up between monthly sessions, that if they'd like to discuss with their coach a specific issue, we're going to be there to offer them the coaching advice and direction. Sometimes they have all the answers. Sometimes they need to reformulate their approach to things. Sometimes we need to talk them off the cliff because they're so worked up about something. We want to prevent them from doing something inappropriate. And then as we move along, it's where do you want to go with your career? What's the next step in your career? But first, before you can get there, you need to look behind you and say, well, who's going to replace me? And so generally 6 to 8 months into a relationship with somebody, we start working on their replacement. Who can we identify that's going to be your replacement? So we learn by teaching. How can you take what you're learning and working on, deploy that with somebody else that is a direct report or someone else in the organization so that you've got a steady stream of leadership following behind you, so that it's very unfortunate, but sometimes people don't get promoted because there's not a replacement for them. They're so vital to organization, they can't promote them because who's going to take their place? But let me tell you, it is real easy to make that decision when they've got 2 or 3 choices to replace them. So always be working on your replacement, and never with the fear that replace you and get you fired. That doesn't happen. Maybe a handful of times in 50 years have I ever seen that happen, but it's always working on your replacement. So now I'm not only working on myself, I'm working with somebody else. And that's really where the flower starts to bloom within the organization to the company's benefit, is now they're getting this framework, and it's really a competency-based framework, a leadership competency framework that not only are your leaders working on, they're working on future leaders with you.
Great. I really like that because it's very similar to a framework that I use and I also share with people. And I learned it from a training I attended where the trainer talked about the profit chain. It's probably well-known framework where you want to achieve the result, which is profit for the company. And the chain starts with a leader, a visionary leader. Work on the people through the culture created to work on the people. Then the people will be able to work with customer to have happy customer through a customer-centric focused organization. And those happy customers will help to generate the profit for the company. And I did my bit on that change through what I call, effective process and profit management. And that's if you are clear about this chain, you know that, okay, I want to get the profit, start with the leadership, and the leader works on people. And that's exactly what you described there.
Well, and you said it much more succinctly and clearly, but I love what you're saying. And it's, it goes back to a book I really love. And in that book, it explains, and I've lived this, I've experienced this dozens and dozens and dozens of times, is a ineffective team or company is generally because you have an ineffective leader. And a leader changes everything. There's no bad teams. There's ineffective leadership that creates the bad teams. You can take bad teams and turn them into very successful and prosperous teams with the proper leadership. I've seen this turn around so many times in my career with one change the leader, you change all the dynamics. So if I can't start with it, I need to get that poor leadership either trained or out of the way, so that, because that's holding me back from my profitability, which is what, well, let's face it, every company's in business for, is to make money for either, the business or their shareholders.
Absolutely. So maybe one more point, and then we move to the next section of this interview, is in terms of the results. So from your work with clients and with the desire to generate the result, we talk about leadership being critical here and work on the people. What are the other item or other points or critical aspect that you will say make leaders not have the result that they desire? Why leaders fail at achieving the result that they want?
Excellent question. Is putting people first, understanding the nuances of leading people. That's the first big step. The second thing is not being very strategic, working in the day, time management, understanding their priorities, setting time aside to achieve their priorities, which staying out of the weeds, staying out of the firefighting from day to day. If I've got a strategy and I've got the discipline and accountability in place, and sometimes a coach has to provide that as well to keep them moving toward the goal, and not allow distractions to take you off what the ultimate achievement needs to be. And then understanding critical thinking, understanding all the different elements of critical thinking and making really good decisions. A lot of people don't think about it. I need to be trained on making decisions, but there actually is a process that we help train executives and managers how to make good decisions. And it starts with open-ended questions to yourself or to others. You have to be collaborative to be a good decision maker. Who, what, when, how, why. All those things are part of critical thinking, but how do I apply each one of those to every decision as quickly as I can to make sure I'm making the single best decision that I possibly can for the organization or for the person I'm dealing with. And very often we make snap decisions or emotional decisions, but there actually is a framework again of making good decisions. Often people, once they understand what that framework and process is, take a step back. In fact, I had one of those conversations just this very week. They'd never thought about it like that. And they dug in right away. I don't ask questions. I just tell people what to do. It was very detrimental to not only yourself, but your team and your company. As a boss, if I'm just telling people what to do all the time based on the limited knowledge that I have, not that you're very smart, not that you don't have a lot of experience, you have limited knowledge, you have biases, you only know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. And critical thinking involves asking a lot of questions. And by asking those questions, there's two huge benefits out of it. Not only will you make a much better informed decision and be learning from the information you gather from others as you ask these questions, but secondly, you're teaching people how to think versus what to think. And there seems to be a real shortage of that in today's society. We won't get into whys behind that, but if you as a leader are ever going to be effective, not only do you have to have great critical thinking skills, you have to be able to teach those same skill sets to others, with the ultimate goal is this team or this organization will run very well without me. They don't need me anymore. That's the ultimate goal of every leader, is your people don't need you anymore, because you've built such great decentralized decision makers, critical thinkers, confident people below you that just, they know what to do because you've led them down that path. So I think that's the key to all that.
Yeah, that's great. I agree absolutely. I was talking to another guest recently, and he used to be a Navy captain, and he was sharing that when you're at sea, storms don't last few hours; they last few days. And when you're the captain, you also want to have some time of rest. So meaning that be able to go to sleep during storms. And the only way you can do that is having a team around you who you can trust when you go to sleep during a storm. And I found that very fascinating because I didn't know that storm lasted few days on the at sea. And so I think that's exactly what you're describing.
Well, and there's so many ties to that story to the business world, because all the problems we face are just storms,
Yeah,
and we need people who can deal with the issues
absolutely.
without us, right?
Yes, yes, great. And so as we draw quite close to the end of our conversation, there are a few typical questions I like to ask on this podcast. First is, I believe in reading. I wasn't a good reader for many years until not so long ago, and since I started, I never stopped. And so I started a series where I share every week to my audience, a book recommendation that come from guests in this podcast. So what would be 3 books that you recommend to our audience and why?
It's hard for me to choose just 3, but one I recently just reread, Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink. It was one of the most fascinating books I've ever read, and how he ties his SEAL team experience as a commander in SEAL to business, and that's his business today, is teaching companies how
I
to.
love that book, and it changed
Love
the
that book.
way I approach leadership. It's ownership first. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely, I love that. The Game of Work, which is about how I can gamify or make fun and create incentive structures that benefit me, that I'm not giving money away, but it improves productivity and results. And then How the Mighty Fall, which is kind of the opposite of a success book, but I always benefit when I can go back and look at others' failures and understand what went wrong so that I can avoid those in the future. And Jim Collins, he wrote Good to Great. He also wrote How the Mighty Fall. There's one company that I know of that appeared in both, and that was Circuit City. They're a case study on bad critical thinking, but they were really good in the beginning. So, but I love the studies and the companies because it's real world stuff. The stories he share, and he's got a framework for how they all failed. It was levels of failure, which I think every business can learn from, because if I understand what level of failure I may be going through, I can recover from that.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're
Yes,
not recognizing that you move to the next level to non-existence. So great book.
I agree with you. It's to have the humility to understand that everything that happens to us has happened before, and there's a pattern to failures. And that's what I like about the work that Ray Dalio is doing with his principle of changing world order, going back through history and studying what has happened before. And I think companies can benefit from the same. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, you go through a lot of interviews, podcasts, and we've spent the last 45 minutes having a great conversation. But maybe there's one question that you wish I'd asked you and I didn't ask you. What would be that question, and how would you have answered it?
I can drone on for hours and hours, but we were talking about sales earlier. What if I want to look at my sales team and understand why they're not being effective, why they're not selling more? What's the one thing that unsuccessful sales teams all have in common, outside of just poor leadership, is they do not take a consultative approach, meaning they're making it about their product or themselves, not about their prospect, not about who they're selling to. People can't be sold anything, but they want solutions. Find out what their pain is, find out what their needs are. If your product can, in fact, or service can, in fact, solve that, you've got a winning formula there. But asking a great list of discovery questions, making it's empathy before expertise. If you've got a very empathetic sales team that is really interested in the needs and being able to provide solutions to whoever their prospective customer is, if they're really good at uncovery of needs, they're going to be wildly successful in sales. They shortcut that one piece of the process, you're going to have failures than successes, way more. But I've seen teams improve their rates by 50, 60% by really getting that one thing down. Very few sales teams are good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Understanding what exactly that the person you're selling to needs and what's the problem that you can solve. Great. Thank you for that. So what would be a parting message that you have for leaders who listen to us today?
Good question. And if anything comes of conversation today in the ears and brains of others, is identify what your strengths are and identify ways you can leverage that strength to more success. But be honest about where your shortcomings are. Is it communication? Is it critical thinking? Is it courageousness? Is it, how do I, what am I coming up short on? Commit yourself to improvement. Well, and I know you're very much like I am. I spend an hour working on myself, either through educating or having my own coach. It's always working on yourself. The more you work on yourself, the company benefits. So please work on yourself. This is an art. This is a craft. And it is, when you start on a journey of improving your leadership skills, it's a lifelong process. You'll never know. And if you understand it can be disciplined enough to be constantly working on yourself, you're going to be so much more successful.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vaughn. So where could people find you to continue this conversation?
I wish they would. You can find me on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. It's Vaughn or Results Driven Leadership, our company page, or my personal page. I'm the only Vaughn Sigmon on LinkedIn, so I won't be hard to find. Or come and visit our website, rdltraining.com. There's a ton of information on there. All of our blogs and podcasts, etc., on there. A ton of information. That's Romeo Delta Lima Training.com. And hey, if you ever like to speak to us, fill out a contact form. We'd love to through your situation, see if we can help you out.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for being with us today.
True pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you. This was the Max Yao Leadership Podcast. Thank you for joining us. To listen to future episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Until next time, keep being the leader everybody trusts and respects.